Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Costanzo. I'm excited to be your host today. I'm Vice President with Springer Publishing. And for those of you who are not familiar with Springer Publishing, we're an award-winning publisher of nursing, healthcare content. We feature books, apps, journals, and digital products. And we're really thrilled to bring our webinar to you today titled Appealing Your College Financial Aid Award at a Time of National and Personal Crisis. We're not surprised. This is a significant audience we have today. It turns out there's massive popularity in this webinar topic. And we plan to provide each of you with a recording of this webinar, given that there's so many of you. We expect the webinar to last about 25 minutes, and then we'll set aside some time for questions. We will also provide some information about some products and perhaps a survey at the end of this webinar. Let's get started with an introduction. Today I'm joined by Mr. Carl Buck, one of the authors of the book, Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Education Without Going Broke. Carl is one of the authors of this book. His co-author is Rick Darvis. So welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, great to be on this webinar with you. Their book was just published last month. You can see it on this screen. And the book, Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Education Without Going Broke, provides some really critical information, tips and secrets that are very helpful for reducing the cost of a nursing degree for those of you who are nurses. Let me just provide a little background regarding Carl. Carl is a financial aid expert with more than 30 years of experience guiding students, parents, and educators on matters related to how to pay for college. And as a former director of financial aid at leading institutions such as Rice University and Rutgers University, and the director of financial aid counseling at the University of California, Carl brings some unique insight and kind of an inside perspective that individuals can really apply to not only the rise in cost of college, but also the issue that we face that we'll be discussing today, which is appealing your financial aid award. Carl has provided quite a wealth of information through a number of different sources. He is the author of a prior publication called Get a Jump, the Student Aid Financial Answer Book, and that was distributed to thousands and thousands of students across the country for many years. And Carl has appeared on numerous talk shows and has been extensively quoted in such leading media as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg Radio. So, Carl, welcome. I'm thrilled to be with you today. And with that, Carl, let me just pass the mic to you. You can start by going through the agenda, and then Carl and I will be discussing a number of different things throughout the presentation. So take it away, Carl.
Great. Thanks, Frank, and welcome everyone to our webinar today. If there ever were a time to discuss appealing college financial aid, that time is now, obviously. So let's take a look at the agenda, which is very inclusive. Why to appeal a college financial aid award, when, how, and the COVID-19 impact that I suspect everyone on this call is probably encountering today. And what do you do if your appeal is denied? Because, as you know, in life, there are not necessarily any guarantees. And if your appeal was denied, what would be some additional funding opportunities for the student and the family? And any other special circumstances that you would want a college to become aware of? And why to complete a free application for federal student aid if you never have before? So there's the agenda. It's content-packed, so we'll move forward. First of all, in this era of COVID-19, regrettably, so many parents, students as well, have lost their job or have their job reduced monetarily. And that's one of the reasons to consider appealing for college financial aid. And one of the recurring tones I'm going to emphasize is take ownership of the process. And what do I mean by that? We know that colleges own their own processes, but I want those attending this particular webinar to own the process for yourself, because no one has your fingerprint in life. So the colleges have their own fingerprint in how they move forward, but this is to be proactive and have families and students move in an assertive way to gain funding. So again, I lost my job. My salary was cut. My grandparents had to come live with us. All kinds of reasons why families will appeal. And as we move forward, we will also talk about other considerations for appeal. And obviously, the COVID-19, and we'll get to exactly what's happening with COVID-19, actually as of today, getting a sense of what various colleges are doing to reach out or not necessarily reach out to families. So moving forward, why appeal? Now, this is another aspect of appealing that would not necessarily directly be related to a loss of income or any impact by COVID-19. This is still something that is of value to become aware of, and that is the scholastic achievement of the student. And what we've done here is to take a look at similar institutions, peer institutions, institutions that are trying to recruit a similar student. Syracuse, Rice, Penn State, Rutgers, you see all of this together. But the point is, when I worked at Rutgers, my boss would say, Carl, let's take a look at what Syracuse is doing to recruit their students and what is Penn State doing. These were the peer institutions. And in similar fashion, Rice students would be applying to MIT and Stanford, and also Dartmouth, Princeton, and Yale, going after similar students. So what's the point here? The point being that a student applicant, because of his or her scholastic ability, their intellectual capacity, or some other aspects of merit scholarship ability, may be able to leverage that talent or those grades and say to an institution, I get a better offer of either student aid or scholarships from Syracuse, but I do want to attend Rutgers. Is there anything you can do to reconsider my offer? This is done thousands of times, and it does not negate the ability for the student to be considered to be enrolled by the institution. So we're mentioning this today because it's not necessarily quite related directly to COVID-19, but it still has an immediate opportunity for the family to be knowledgeable about.
Carl, just a quick question.
Sure.
Question. If I'm an adult student and I'm currently enrolled, would this be something that would apply to me, or is it primarily a student just starting their college?
Well, great question, Frank, and we'll actually cover this as we move forward, but I'd rather answer it directly right now since you posed it. The point being, if in fact you're currently at an institution, what most students fail to do is to continue applying for upper class scholarships at the same institution. And what I try to tell families is applying for student aid is not one and done. It's one and continuing, meaning let's say a student just missed out on getting an entering freshman scholarship, regardless of the institution. However, they're really doing well academically, they have defined their major, and they're ready to move into their sophomore year. If I were that student, I would head directly to the department of my major in the latter part of my spring in my first year, if I have good grades, and say, I'd like to be reconsidered for a scholarship for continuing students. And many colleges have scholarships from the institution for upper class students. Great question, Frank, but don't stop me any further. We'll move forward.
Thank you.
When do you appeal? Immediately, ASAP. And as I've often said, doing in-person presentations, run, don't walk, to the student aid office. So in this new era of appeals, and everyone is appealing more than ever before, you have to really take a look at the processes required by the institution you're planning on attending. What's the protocol to apply? And they are all different. And I'll be discussing that a little later on in this presentation. Actually, this morning, I went ahead and took a look at a variety of colleges in the country and how they're moving forward with a variety of appeals, specifically relating to COVID-19. And I'll discuss it as we move forward. But again, the recurring theme, apply immediately, now, today, not tomorrow. Appeal when there is any change that impacts your family financially, and only the listener, only the people on this webinar today know what those changes are. And don't rule anything out. In my own experience, I've gone to various colleges' websites and taken a look at the so-called appeal criteria. In my opinion, if your subject matter concerns are not covered in that criteria, so what? It's your concern, and this is all about you. And the schools are extremely flexible today, more than they have been historically. And as we were talking about earlier, the tip here is scholastic achievement funding may also be appealed, meaning this is not just about need-based assistance. And need-based is something we'll talk about as we move forward as well. But again, you can still talk about scholastic funding, additional funding, even to assist you through COVID-19. Let's take a look at the fall 2020 academic year. Scrutinize all fees. Well, it's interesting because, again, when you do research and take a look at a variety of institutions, regardless if they're private or public, every college is doing it different as it relates to how do they think they're going to open up in the fall. What really are their plans? And in my opinion, the jury is still out. I know that there have been some very definitive comments from presidents of major universities throughout the country saying they absolutely will open in the fall. However, there is always this verbal asterisk that is expressed soon thereafter, saying we'll probably have classes start perhaps a little earlier, and we'll end our classes on campus before Thanksgiving. Or we may have a combination, a hybrid offering of classes online and in person. So in effect, it's all over the map. So it really behooves the listener today to get a good, clear, transparent sense of communication from the institution that you're planning to attend as an entering student or as a returning student, be it undergrad, grad, or professional, and what are the protocols for your return. And I can assure you, you check every day, various colleges, it seems to be a very flexible situation. So I just forewarn folks, check every single day because that's how dynamic this COVID-19 situation is. And moving forward, how to appeal your College Financial Aid Award. And let me emphasize one thing too. There's a combination of what I call truth and proof. Meaning when you're applying for college financial aid, the institution wants to believe what you're appealing, and at the same time, you have to be able to prove what you are appealing. So you want to have proper documentation. You want to be able to corroborate the kind of information that you've submitted to the institution. And it's really important that the individual submitting the appeal information must keep records of everything that you've submitted. It's really critical because things get lost. So what are the requirements for submission by the institution? Again, check the college's website to determine how you should move forward. One more time, call the school for advice. Things are in flux, things are changing, and regrettably, some of the institutions may have downsized their staff because of funding issues. So you're going to have to be extremely patient and assertive to ensure that you're being heard by the institution. And some institutions are not reaching out to students. Some are not. And I'll make comments about that later on in the presentation. Again, here's my recurring theme, truth and proof, providing details. And bear in mind that colleges realize today in COVID-19 that it costs a lot more to recruit a student than it does to retain one. And let's be real here. Colleges are all about education and business. So they need to pay the bills like everybody else. And that's why schools will no doubt be far more flexible in this COVID-19 environment that is impacting us today. And I do want to mention some of the reasons why you want to take a look at appealing. When you fill out that FAFSA, it's interesting that you have to report income from 2 prior years, 2 tax years. Well, the situation is that's not reality. Today is your reality when, regrettably, families have lost jobs. They have reduced income. It permeates the country, unfortunately. So you want to make sure that the financial aid office is aware of the fact that the income that you had to report from 2 tax years ago isn't that of today. And also in the financial aid world, there's a term called projected year income. Projected year income means I don't have a job and I have no money coming forward for next year. And maybe all you have is unemployment. So you have to tell your story. And when you do tell your story, my recommendation as a former college administrator is to have the family tell the story, not just the student. I've heard a lot of student aid professionals, other experts in the field say, let's have the student tell the story, but I don't support that. The reason being, many students are not necessarily familiar with the parental financial situation. So I think it's better holistically to have the student, the parent or parents, based upon the family situation, submit that appeal in writing and be truthful, tell your story, and keep appealing if, in fact, you were denied. We'll talk about that later on as well.
Carl, just a quick question. If there's a temporary furlough, but you don't know how long that might last, that sounds like it might be different than the projected year income. How is that handled? How should that be handled by the family or individual?
Well, again, a temporary furlough is just that, obviously, and then you have to report the temporary financial situation. Sometimes the word temporary isn't clearly defined because no one really knows what that will be. So, I mean, if someone were appealing to me, if I were on a college campus today as a financial aid counselor or on a committee, I would then ask the family, please project for us, the institution, your expectation of how long that particular furlough will be. And then the college would probably want the family to return back after a projected amount of time. For example, let's say the family responded saying, I think I'll be furloughed for approximately 3 to 4 months. Then the financial aid office would say, we want to revisit this in 3 to 4 months, and then the aid office internally would have a note on the file to contact the family again, because some families just may not remember to contact the college again. That's how it normally works. All right. So again, just getting a sense, is your income too high? Did you also, possibly save too much money and you don't have those savings anymore? Anything that you feel is of a financial impact, that's reality. And the next slide that we have up here is the COVID-19 actual impact itself. Now, this is really interesting because what I did in preparation just for this slide is to take a look at what some of the schools are doing. And here's what's going on. For example, I'll take a look at what's going on at Ohio State. COVID-19 financial assistance for students. This is taken right off of the Ohio State website. And it says, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known now as CARES, is to help mitigate financial impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. Ohio State University also, in addition to the COVID-19 funding from the federal government, by the way, is setting aside a portion of university donor funds to assist with this emergency. So hats off to Ohio State. A little more detail about this, and it's on every college website as it relates to what is included in financial assistance. What can a student expect to be helped with? Items would be expenses such as food, housing, college course materials, technology, healthcare, and childcare. That's pretty inclusive. And the good news is, at least at Ohio State, they're going to assist undergraduate, graduate, and professional students on all Ohio State campuses. Now, this will not necessarily ring true throughout the country. Again, as I said in the opener about fingerprints, families have their own fingerprint, as will a college. Every college will be different. Now, bear in mind, again, what this is going to cover: food, housing, course materials, technology, healthcare, and childcare, and perhaps even transportation costs for a student who had to leave the campus and return home. So you really have to check on the campus website and see what their processes may be. And there was another institution here in Florida I took a look at, and what they're doing, a school down here where I'm living in Florida, is they're saying to students, we will assist students who demonstrate financial need, not necessarily a Pell Grant recipient or having to apply to prove that they're receiving funding from a free application for federal student aid, but they're saying we'll try to help a student with summer assistance if they go to summer school, fall funding for fall of 2020, and spring of 2021 if funds are available. So you're seeing a heck of a lot of flexibility by colleges, and this is the time for the family to move forward in a positive direction. And regrettably, there are some institutions that I know for a fact, having talked to students who have returned from colleges right now or living in Florida, that have not reached out to them. So in order to get the special COVID-19 impact funding, what you really need to do is see what the application process is by the institution that you're planning on attending or returning to. Each college, I can assure you, will be different, and hopefully they'll be transparent. And talking recently to a few students here in Sarasota, Florida, where I reside, they were telling me some colleges in the Northeast reached out to them and some schools do not. Some colleges in Texas reached out to students, some did not. That's why I want the family listening today, the student listening today, to take ownership of the process and the responsibility to knock on that college's door, because they may not knock on your door. Well, what happens if your appeal is denied? Why was it denied? What you're going to have to do is really get a hold of a real live human being and get in touch with the student aid office. Find out, was it because of lack of documentation? Is it that your funds have been depleted? And oh, by the way, if a family applied for an appeal, let's say prior to COVID-19 on any other reason, there may be more funds available now because of supplemental funds coming in from the federal government and donors. So re-appeal if you've been denied. Now, if the student didn't commit to the institution saying, well, I'm unsure if I'm going to matriculate, unsure if I'm going to enroll, then the institution is going to say, well, why should we reach out and help you? So I would suggest that you commit to the institution in order to have that appeal reviewed and hopefully gain success via the appeal. And did you not meet the institution's appeal criteria? And that criteria might have opened up, meaning the floodgates have probably opened up. Recent research has shown that about a third of students today are rethinking their plans for the fall. Do I enroll? Do I re-enroll? What decisions do I make? Everything's in a state of flux, and that's why we said earlier today in this presentation, we can assure you that colleges are far more flexible. They want you to enroll, they want to guide you, they want to educate you, and they need to pay their bills as well. What do you do if that appeal is denied? Well, of course, here we are in a virtual reality situation of not being able to appeal in person, but however, with some of these presidents around the country saying, we will hold on-campus classes, then I would appeal in person if you get to that campus. And if you can't get there, then I definitely want to have a phone call with the key decision maker in either the student aid office, could be in the admissions office, or it could even be in the department of your major, be it engineering, history, architecture. There are a variety of pathways to look at to appeal. It just isn't one particular office, like just admissions, like just student aid. There are many ways to do this. Think of the institution as the hub, and the spokes are the various departments, admissions, student aid, and the department of the major that you're focused on as well. What are some of the additional funding opportunities? Well, obviously it's going to take time to have an appeal reviewed, and if I'm appealing, I would say to the institution, can you please give me an idea of your timeline? You see, what we don't have today in this country is a COVID-19 student advocate. The only advocate is the family. The only advocate is the student. Then you create a partnership with the institution. So now you have a joint advocacy. But other than that, you, the student, you, the family, have to drive the success. Now, there may be additional emergency funds available from the financial aid office that are not necessarily related to COVID-19. I took a look at a variety of the Ivy League institutions, some of which, by the way, Princeton and Harvard, accepted initially the COVID-19 funds and then returned them. And other Ivy League institutions, Brown, etc., accepted them, and some others have not yet made their decision as to whether or not they're going to accept those funds. That's why I said earlier today, everything is in a state of flux. So you may be able to get a one-time grant from the institution that's not related to COVID-19 federal funds, but related to the issue, and you may be able to get an emergency short-term loan fund from the school. But you've got to ask. If you don't ask and you're silent, then the school is silent and they have nothing to respond to. It's just that simple. Again, just reemphasizing the emergency funding aspect. Everyone's all ears at colleges. They really want to help. I mean in a very proactive way. But if I'm appealing for emergency funding, I'm going to ask for a certain amount. Some schools may have a certain threshold of a maximum, but they don't know what your need is. So you need to express what your need is. And that's how you do it, by saying it in writing, and then following up with a phone call to reaffirm that people have received your appeal. And then you have to drive your success in partnership with that institution. I referred to this earlier today, but I can't emphasize this enough. If a student has received a merit scholarship, I definitely would appeal for additional funding, because of the fact that if the family was found to not have any financial need initially, that situation could be regrettably different today, and those merit scholarship funds could be available for more funding or even new funding. Remember, we talked about earlier that about a third of students across the country may not enroll at their college of choice. If that's the case, then merit scholarship funds could open up very quickly. So it's not one and done. It's one and continue to knock on that door. So again, other places to go, admissions office for first-time undergraduate students. And if you have a major, check a look at English, history, and engineering. So whatever your major happens to be. All right, moving forward. Additional funding opportunities from various state organizations. This is really critical, and there's no way for us to know exactly what each state is doing, so you have to knock on that state higher education agency door. New York State is coming up with some new flexibility arrangements for COVID-19. Pennsylvania Higher Ed Assistance Authority, New Jersey, California Student Aid Commission. Every state agency is trying to do their best within their own reasons, because their coffers are dwindling as well. Tax dollars aren't what they expected them to be, but in addition to reaching out to the institutions, you've got to reach out to your own state agency and see what funding they have. And every state higher education agency will have an 800 number. If you can't find it, check with your college of choice. They certainly will know how to guide you from that point on. Any negative consequences? Not in this day and age. Everyone should apply immediately based upon your own unique needs. And I can assure you, if you feel you're on the fence as it relates to selecting a college, that is not negative as it relates to admissibility. Colleges want you. I can assure you, they want to enroll you and retain you. So that's why we talked again about appealing ASAP. And one more reminder, at the bottom of this particular slide, is there any possibility to review my academic credentials again? Yeah, of course. If you were waitlisted, you might be moved up to the front of the list. And if you were denied admission, reapply. Many colleges had a May 1 admissions deadline date. That has been the date across the country, but now many have extended it to June 1, 2020 for a so-called admission deadline. And I suspect as well that deadline may be moved later in the summer in addition.
Carl, just a quick question here. If there are two students, one that needs more aid than another, will the amount of aid have any negative consequence when compared to, say, another student that has a need for less aid?
You mean from the same family or different families?
Different families.
Because there could be different situations. If a family has been separated, you'd be amazed at the personal situation that exists today. But as it relates to one student needing more than the other,
yes.
Well, there are some schools that talk about being need blind, but I suspect today, in this new era of COVID-19, need factor may be a consideration. And I don't feel terribly robust about saying that, but I want to be very transparent. I think need could play a factor. To what role, I don't know. But let me have another comment about this, Frank. Let's say that a family has two kids in college at the same time at the same school. What if that family asks for a tuition discount to the college admissions office? I know it for a fact, without naming the institution, well-known institution. I worked with a family a number of years ago. They had twins. The twins were going to this well-known private institution in the South, and they got a 20% discount on tuition per student, meaning per twin, to go to that college. I think there can be all kinds of deals, steals and deals more than ever before.
That's helpful. Thanks, Carl.
Sure. And moving forward, taking a look at transfer students, this really is reality. Are students going to not continue paying for out-of-state tuition? Let's say a student resides in New Jersey and they're going to the University of Arizona in Tucson. Do they want to continue to pay out-of-state tuition? Or do they want to transfer in or stay in-state and just pay in-state tuition? That is a consideration. Now, if a student doesn't want to transfer, what about their credits? Will they transfer? Not all credits may. And then the student has to figure out, oh my goodness, how long is it going to take me now to get that degree? Extra semester, extra year, and then those costs start growing exponentially. So there's a lot of things to factor in. And if I were a student, I would reach out to the academic advisor at the institution that they're attending for proper guidance to ensure how they're going to make the right decision. Other special circumstances, this is more or less a reminder of what we're talking about, projected loss of income. Again, this infamous prior year. I can assure you that Congress is right now looking at possibly adjusting the free application for federal student aid for 2021 to have an additional line of where people can report that they have unusual circumstances. Years ago, you could do that. You can't do it anymore. There's no way to appeal on the FAFSA. No way. You have to go to the school, and I would ask the school to put in new information on the FAFSA rather than do it myself. And what about care of special needs for a disabled child or unreimbursed medical or dental expenses? Loss of a business or farm, especially I would think out in the Midwest and out in the Rockies. And again, believe it or not, the cost of a private secondary education. Some private colleges, not all, but some, will factor in that a family has paid for their child's private high school education. And that may reduce a family's expected contribution. I wasn't aware of that until I went from the public world in college to a private institution. This is not necessarily well known by families, but it's a factor that a family should bring up. Bring up anything you can at any time. And moving forward, we're getting towards the end now, and why would you submit a FAFSA if you never have before? And so many families have said to me historically, Carl, there's no reason for me to submit a FAFSA. I make too much money. Well, that may have been historically, but today it's, I used to make too much money, I don't now. And what do? So submit that FAFSA ASAP. Work with the college, have them guide you through the process, and you can even return back to your high school guidance counselors. If you know them, call them on the phone. I'm sure they're probably not on campus yet, but if you have a connection, make sure people can advise you how to move forward if you've never applied before, because your time is your now time. Moving forward, well, we really are here to help. Basically, we're going to go into Q&A, and as we finish the Q&A, I'll give you very 30-second elevator roundup to wrap up the webinar.
Oh, thank you, Carl. So there's some clear messages here. The threads that have come through certainly take ownership of the process as being a common point, excuse me, that you've been making, and appeal immediately. Pretty well every slide you've talked about is take action now. So those are two clear messages that that I'm sure everybody has heard. Just a couple. We've got quite a few questions here. We probably have time for about 3 or 4. One common question that seems to have come up here is, how often do appeals get granted?
Well, prior to COVID-19, I'd say approximately 30%. And now with COVID-19, I think the jury is out. I don't think anyone really knows, but if I were to hazard a guess, I would say that percentage from 30 has gone up to at least 50. And you have to remember, too, that many families don't realize how to appeal, when, and that's why we're doing this. And I applaud Springer for sponsoring this kind of a webinar.
Carl, this is a question from a nursing student, graduate nursing student, actually. I'm a grad nursing student. I received some need-based grant funds. Do I follow the same steps you've just described to appeal for additional assistance?
Well, as it relates to a graduate nursing student, they want to go through their graduate nursing office. When I worked at UCLA, we had undergraduate students who were appealing for undergraduate assistance, and the grad students to a grad office. And then as it relates to, for example, nurses who are going on for the graduate nursing degree, they want to go right to the student aid office in the graduate nursing program, not to the undergrad office, but to the grad nursing office. So that's a totally different pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to that actual graduate office. That's good to know. I think you might have covered this. This individual is saying, since it will take time to have my appeal reviewed, are there other kinds of funds available immediately?
What I would recommend is see if the institution has their own institutional emergency funds that are not necessarily related to COVID-19. Think of COVID-19 as being supplemental, and they're impact funds. But the institution may have set aside emergency funds to help you, and I can assure you, my own college that I graduated from, they just sent me a flyer yesterday asking me to donate to assist students for COVID-19 assistance. So alumni are giving today as they never have before. Historically, folks would donate based upon athletic needs, but I think right now the holistic aspect of assisting students and families will far outweigh athletic needs.
Good to know. This is probably a common scenario. This individual sounds like they had to leave their campus due to COVID-19. And the individual writes, since I was told by my college that I had to leave campus due to COVID-19, how do I appeal to get money back from my room and board that I already paid?
Well, a lot of colleges are doing this very differently. First of all, I would suggest you want to go to the school's website and see if there's a Q&A. Actually, I've gone to the Harvard website and taken a look at their extremely well-written, inclusive list of how to work with students in this kind of a COVID-19 situation. And if, in fact, the student was asked to go home, they're no longer in the dorm. Some institutions, like Harvard, are prorating the amount of room and board that would have been expended that is being returned to the student. Other institutions, I'm not sure about. So you're going to have to call probably the residential facility office, residential living, also known as the dormitories. I would call that office directly to find out how are they handling any return of funds. And bear in mind that a student's financial aid award for the next year is based upon their living situation. Will they be in the dorms or not? So a heads up is make sure that the financial aid award is addressing exactly what the student's cost of attendance will be for fall of 2000 and then spring of 2021.
Okay. Carl, we have time for one more question. This individual is from the CSU system, and they're asking, given that classes will be online in the fall, what's your opinion on the likelihood of not having to pay things like campus fees, internet fees, athletic fees, that kind of thing?
I think that's going to be dependent upon the university's flexibility, the university's transparency, and I think many colleges are trying to figure that out as we speak today. I don't think there's a lot of definitive responses yet. I think there are a lot of board of trustees meeting, a lot of presidents meeting with their cabinets trying to determine how do we move forward as it relates to students being totally online, totally telecommuting next year. You see, you've got to factor in that room and board brings in millions and millions of dollars to institutions. So if that student is not campus to live in the dorms and pay for a room and food, there's huge loss of revenue. So again, as I said earlier today, Frank, it's not one and done asking questions. It's one and continue asking.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been terrific, Carl. Any final words, thoughts as we wrap this up?
I do, yeah. Again, first of all, I want to appreciate Springer for taking the opportunity to provide this information for families across the country. And it really is important to understand that schools want to be transparent, but they are under duress, the same as families are. The difference is this. The family is the one spending the money to go to the college, and the college wants families funding. So I want families to be extremely proactive. There's no better time than now, no better time than today to realize that in this unusual situation, you may hold better cards than you realize. So just be assertive and go after the kind of funds that you deserve.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. Well, thank you very much, Carl. This is always such a pleasure to do this with you. Springer Publishing values you as an expert and an author, and we do truly appreciate everything you're doing for our audiences. For everyone who's listening, we will provide you with a recording of this webinar, and we'll also be sending out a survey to collect your feedback regarding this webinar. As I mentioned earlier, Carl Buck and Rick Darvis are the authors of the title you see on the screen right now, Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Education Without Going Broke. For those of you who are nurses, even those who aren't, the book has some fabulous tips regarding saving and reducing the cost of a college education. So do take advantage of that. It is available at springerpub.com, and it was recently published about 2 months ago, so it's hot off the presses. So once again, Carl, thank you so much. Thank you to our audience, and look for more information from Carl in future webinars, podcasts, blogs, and articles. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Be well.